My name is Vicki Forrest. I'm the CEO of the ANZA Technology Network, and I'd like to welcome you to ANZA's first webinar of 2013, Getting to Wow, with Bill Reichert, Managing Director of Garage Technology Ventures here in Silicon Valley. Now, first of all, we have a few housekeeping items. If you do have any technical problems during the webinar, please call the number on your screen, country code 1-805-617-7000. This webinar will be recorded and all attendees will receive a link so you can replay today's presentation. Now, there's a very large audience today and all audience members are in listen-only mode. This is to ensure the presenters can be heard by everyone. If you have questions during the presentation, please type them into the question box on your webinar dashboard, and we'll answer as many of your questions as we can at the end of the presentation. As many of you know, ANZA is a business accelerator based here in Silicon Valley. We work with entrepreneurs from Australia, New Zealand, Asia and the Americas who run innovative technology businesses and help those companies get a foothold into new markets like the US and China. Now, here are some upcoming opportunities to get connected with the ANZA Technology Network. ANZA will be in Australia for 4 weeks during March, and I'll be with one of our US-based mentors, Mike Loftus, and Mike and I will be available to meet with companies one-on-one to discuss your US or China business opportunities. We'll be visiting both Sydney and Melbourne, and I encourage you to email me at vicky@anzatechnet.com to arrange to meet with us to talk about your business plans and how ANZA services can help you accelerate them. And remember, one-on-one meetings are always available via Skype, no matter where you are in the world. Whether you're an early-stage startup or a growing company with solid revenues and a growing customer base, we think you'll find today's webinar of real value. If you have questions during the presentation, as I said, please type them into the question box on your webinar dashboard, and we'll get to as many of those as we can during the Q&A. And now, Javier, if you could hand the screen across to Bill. And it gives me great pleasure to introduce Bill Reichert, the Managing Director of Garage Technology Ventures, a well-established venture fund here in Silicon Valley. Bill has more than 20 years' experience as an entrepreneur and operating executive before he joined Garage in '98, where he now focuses on early-stage IT and materials science companies. Bill was a co-founder in several venture-backed technology startups, including Trademark Software, The Learning Company, and Academic Systems. He earned his BA at Harvard College and his MBA at Stanford. He's been a founding contributor to many of the organizations in Silicon Valley focused on entrepreneurs: the Churchill Club, Silicon Valley Association of Startup Entrepreneurs, the Small Fund Roundtable of the VC Task Force, and he's a member of the Council on Foreign Relations in New York. In Bill's words, it's not good enough to just have a solid pitch anymore. You've got to get an investor to say, wow. It is my pleasure to have Bill lead ANZA's first webinar of 2013, Getting to Wow. Thank you, Bill.
Thank you so much, Vicki. It is my great pleasure and delight to be part of this organization and to have the opportunity to speak with the ANZA community. Yes, I guess it's good morning to those of you who are in Australia, good evening to those of you who are in the United States. I happen to be in New York City today, and am doing this from my hotel room. I'm at the Waldorf Astoria as I am participating in actually an event that IBM is putting together for global entrepreneurship. So it's sort of deep into what I'm focusing on right now is the point of view on what it takes to be a successful entrepreneur right now in a global setting. So Vicky and ANZA have been very gracious in inviting me to present to the group about to talk about my point of view on what it takes to transform a ordinary pitch into an extraordinary pitch, which gets the attention of investors and customers and others that you want to connect with. The origin of this, actually, just to give you a little bit of background, is throughout my career, as Vicky was saying, I started most of my career, I spent most of my career as an entrepreneur on the other side of the table. And as an entrepreneur pitching to venture capitalists, I realized that there was this sort of dark magic associated with venture capital that only the few elite were able to get access to. And I was disappointed in the fact that it seemed as though nobody would give me the straight scoop as to what it took to convince a venture capitalist to invest in your company. So, I had the great good fortune of having a number of mentors and coaches and supporters in my various startup companies, and I was very successful over the years in raising, as it turned out, well over $100 million for my different startup companies. But I realized I did it almost accidentally. And so when we started Garage in 1998, we decided we were going to create a venture capital firm designed for the benefit of entrepreneurs and share with entrepreneurs the dirty little secrets of venture capital to make them, to enable them to be more successful so that they didn't have to guess as to what it took to be successful pitching to entrepreneurs. Pitching to venture capitalists, I'm sorry. One of the things that I realized, having crossed over to the venture capital community, was that this concept that was referred to as an elevator pitch was, in fact, almost a cruel joke that was being perpetrated on entrepreneurs. We in the venture capital community were asking entrepreneurs to create these things we called elevator pitches, and we thought we were being nice, and so we gave them 120 seconds or 2 minutes to distill down everything in their business plan into 2 minutes of rapid fire pitch to try to condense it into what we refer to as an elevator pitch. What you could present to an entrepreneur as they went from, up and down a building in an elevator. But so one day a few years ago, I was asked to be a judge in an elevator pitch competition, and I was talking with the organizer of the event, and I said, this is pretty perverse because we're asking these entrepreneurs to do these elevator pitches, and when you think about it, the only time that entrepreneurs really use these things we call elevator pitches is at elevator pitch competitions. They're not really useful in the real world. We're actually not training them to do communications that are relevant to their day-to-day activities. We're asking them to do this artificial elevator pitch thing that for which we create competitions. So in that context, God bless the organizer of that event, she said, okay, Bill, then tell us, what is it we should be teaching entrepreneurs? And I realized that what we really needed to be helping entrepreneurs with was helping them figure out how to articulate their value proposition in terms that are clear, that we can understand, and compelling, that we would say that's actually impressive, and credible, in other words, that we would believe. So put that all together, and we call that getting to wow. So that's what I want to spend some time today talking with you about, is how to get to wow. And the difference between that and what you might have been exposed to before in terms of a typical elevator pitch type of framework. So So I'm hoping the technology is working here and now everybody is seeing my second slide, which is picture of an elevator and the text typical elevator pitch. What we have gotten at Garage Technology Ventures over the years is, a wide range of elevator pitches, and I actually picked this one out as an example of a company. We actually received this elevator pitch from this company. I changed the name to protect the guilty here. But in the course of asking entrepreneurs to distill down their business pitches into a few words, typically what we get is this very high-level, abstract, highly enthusiastic text that goes something like this. Coolco is a dynamic startup company positioned for strong market growth and expansion. Management has created a cutting-edge business model that has the potential to play a dominant role in this exploding sector. And so somehow we've been coaching entrepreneurs. It's important to be excited. It's important to be passionate. It's important to be enthusiastic. But somehow we haven't communicated to entrepreneurs it's important to be clear what it is you're talking about. Here's another one that I particularly liked. Again, this is a real company. God bless these guys. They were really trying to build an important company, but the language that they tried to communicate went something like this. As the world economy has moved more pervasively into the information age, businesses and individuals have struggled to find better ways to manage information. Modern computers, software and databases, blah, 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 blah. So we have accidentally created this circumstance where at the other end, if you're listening, you're sitting there hearing this language, and you're going, huh? What is it that you guys are talking about? We get the passion. We get the enthusiasm. We get that you want to change the world, but we don't understand what it is you're trying to do. And so the typical investor in a circumstance like this, at this point, is diving underneath the conference room table, turning on their iPhone and checking out their email. And where that leaves you as an entrepreneur is, this is where, as they say, the rubber meets the sky. In other words, you're losing traction here. You're not making a connection with your audience. So what you really need to do is you need to figure out a way to get to wow. And so what I want to talk a little bit about today is what does it take for an entrepreneur to articulate his or her value proposition in terms that are clear and compelling and credible. So as I was saying before, I had this extraordinary cognitive dissonance around elevator pitches, that we were trying to coach entrepreneurs to do these elevator pitches that were only relevant in elevator pitch competitions and weren't really relevant in the real world. So I was trying to create a context for communication that would be relevant in the real world, and that's the whole point of getting to wow. What I want to do is help entrepreneurs develop 15, 20-second, simple, compelling articulation of their value proposition that they can use in all sorts of contexts. So when do you need to get to wow? So you need it, obviously, when you're pitching to investors. So whether you're at the front end of the process and trying to convince investors to listen to you, or you're going through the process, hopefully marching toward term sheet, marching toward docs, you need to make sure that your clear value proposition is embedded deeply in the investor's mind. So you need it for pitching, but you also need it when you're talking to customers. Now, it might be slightly different, but basically you've got 15 or 20 seconds to make an incredible impression on customers as to why you're sufficiently compelling and differentiated that they should be listening to you. You need it when you're at events and trade shows, when you're schmoozing, when you're meeting people and just trying to build your network. And what you want to do is convince the person that you're talking to that you've got something interesting and compelling. Now again, when you're at some sort of trade show event or a cocktail party or whatever it is, you don't have 2 minutes to regurgitate your business plan in sort of a high-speed version that anybody's going to care about. That's the typical elevator pitch competition. The elevator pitch doesn't work in that context. You need something crisp and compelling that you can use. When you're posting updates, so you've got text, you're doing, social media, you're using Twitter or LinkedIn or Facebook to try to update the world on what you're doing, you need a short, concise, compelling message that explains what your value proposition is. Recruiting employees, how do you get the word out that you are a hot company that has a compelling value proposition? When you're looking for strategic partners, how do you get the word out that you're the company that other players should partner with? When you're sending out emails, it's not enough to say to whom it may concern, this is our company, please read the following and let us know if you're interested. Whether you're talking to an investor or a customer, you need some text, some very short, crisp text that explains your value proposition in ways that are clear and compelling that you can include in an email. On your website, obviously, I can't believe how many technical founders have created these websites that extol the virtues of their technology but don't make it clear what's in it for the customer. When you leave a voicemail, we get voicemails all the time from entrepreneurs who call up, we have our phone number on our website. So naturally, we get entrepreneurs who call us up and say, hey, I want you to invest in my company, but they fall short when it comes to convincing us in a voicemail message why we should call back. Press releases, marketing materials, again, this should all be an integrated message in terms of what's compelling about your company. When you're training the team, everybody in your company should be able to articulate your value proposition in terms that are compelling. And of course, all I'm saying is all the time, when you're an entrepreneur, whether you're talking to investors, when you're talking to customers, whether you're talking to potential employees, whether you're talking to strategic partners, you are always pitching. You are always trying to convince an audience that you have something that is compelling. And so that's what I want you all to develop, is this crisp, compelling statement of your value proposition. So that's what I mean by wow. That's what I mean by creating a wow statement that is a core mantra for your company. You share with your employees. Everybody knows it. It's part of your marketing materials. It's part of your communications. So how do you get there? So it's in recipe, it's really simple. You got 15 or 20 seconds. In practice, this is really, really hard. And what we've discovered over the years is that it's amazing that entrepreneurs, startup companies, even developed companies have great difficulty expressing in very concise and compelling terms what their unique value proposition is. So all I'm asking you guys to do, and it's going to take some time and it's going to take some work, but you should get started now, is figure out a way to craft what I'm calling a wow statement, because I want to distinguish it from the elevator pitch. But basically, I'm substituting for the elevator pitch. In 15 or 20 seconds, be clear about what it is you do. I want to understand what you're trying to accomplish. Be compelling about what you're doing. I want to understand how much better you are than anybody else that's trying to do the same thing. And I want you to be credible. In other words, give me some reason to believe that what you're saying is true, and don't throw me off by using hyperbolic language that is not credible. So I'm going to give you a simple framework that I'm hoping all of you can use to craft this wow statement, to put together a 15 or 20-second statement of your value proposition. So the first thing you need to do, first sentence, is the description of what you do that you can do better than anyone else. But I want you to use language that is not full of these extreme, hyperbolic, superlative adjectives, you know, curve-jumping, paradigm-shifting, disruptive technology, changing the world. God bless, that's true. But think instead in terms of getting your listener to understand in a very concrete sense what the heck it is that you're doing. So what's the model for that? Well, the model for that is journalism. So a good journalist will be able to capture what it is you do and express it in language that everyone can understand. Again, in the United States, typically journalists are trained to write at an 8th grade level. Not that everybody in the U.S. is dumb, and I don't mean to imply that. What I mean to say is that frequently high technology companies get into domains of esoterica that average people or lay people don't necessarily understand. And so it's really important that you start by being clear about what it is you do in language that everyone can understand. And so the high end of that spectrum is, imagine that a journalist for the Wall Street Journal or some other, high-level business publication is writing a report on your company. What is the sentence that they would write that explains what it is you do? So a Wall Street Journal reporter would not say, the other day we met with a company that has a curve-jumping, paradigm-shifting, disruptive technology that's going to change the world, period. Because there's no substance or content to that sentence. Instead, they would say something that sounds kind of boring. XYZ company has developed a widget that enables data centers to increase their performance by a factor of 3. Whatever it is, whatever your particular value proposition is. So take out all the hyperbolic language and put in clear, concise, concrete language that everybody can understand. So sentence 1 in crafting your wow is a clear description of what it is you do. The background for this is that unbelievably a very high percentage of entrepreneurs that come into our office and start pitching us spend the first several minutes talking about stuff that leaves us confused about what is it that you guys really do. And I want to blame some of my compatriots in the venture capital industry for this because, there's lots of blogs and guides and, sort of tip sheets for entrepreneurs that say things like, oh, it's really important that you be clear, you be passionate about what you're doing. And so entrepreneurs interpret that to mean, oh, I got to use a bunch of hyperbolic language. And, there's some other guidelines that say, oh, well, the first thing you need to do is you need to explain the problem. And I'm, going on record here saying if you ever come across some guidebook that says the first thing you need to do when you're pitching your company is explain the problem, I'm telling you right now that is wrong. Because the first thing you need to do is you need to explain what the heck it is you're doing. Then you can explain the problem if the problem needs explaining. But if you start by explaining the problem, most likely I already know what the problem is. You know, people will launch into these 5-minute dissertations on how there's a lot of traffic on the internet. I know there's a lot of traffic on the internet. Every venture capital on the planet, every venture capitalist on the planet knows there's a lot of traffic on the internet. We've all heard a bunch of entrepreneurs talk about managing that traffic. We get it. You don't have to spend a lot of time explaining to us there's a lot of traffic on the internet. So what I really want to hear very quickly is some clear statement about how you're going to attack that problem. What is it you do? So sentence one, what is it that you do better than anyone else on the planet? Then sentence two, I want you to explain what is the compelling benefit that you offer to your target customer. So you're putting a few things together in this, but the most important thing here is what is your compelling benefit that uniquely establishes your capability, that makes somebody say, oh, that's different, that's interesting, I want to listen. So what I want you to put here is first of all, I want you to be clear on what the benefit is. I don't want you to describe technology. I don't want you to tell us how many years you've spent working on this clever technology that is, going to be very exciting. What I want you to do is explain what is the benefit to your target customer. Later on, you can tell us what the technology is that delivers this benefit. But first, I want to hear, in essence, what I want to hear here is, why does anybody care at the level of a customer who will buy your solution? That's the essence of a compelling benefit. So a way to write this sentence, or at least to get you going, writing the sentence, is to say, the big idea behind our company is ... What's the big idea? What's the big idea that a customer will care about? So that's the second sentence. And then the third sentence is your differentiation. So to let you know a little bit about what goes on inside the mind of an investor, the challenge you have as an entrepreneur is, I don't care how unique you think your idea is, investors think they've heard it before. Most likely they have heard it before, but at a minimum, they've heard something very much like it before. So your challenge, even if you think nobody else has thought of this on the planet, every investor you pitch to, or almost every investor you pitch to, is going to say in the back of their head, oh yeah, I've heard this story before. And they're sitting there thinking, now where did I hear that? Who was that company that came in and told us something like this? So they're off. You're now, 12 seconds into your pitch, and they're off thinking about another frickin' company. You don't want that. What you want to say at this point is, unlike the other companies that are trying to solve this problem, what we have been able to develop and deliver is this. So you want to answer that nagging question that's spinning in the back of the investor's brain. How are these guys different from all those other companies that I've heard who are doing something very similar to this? So that's your third sentence, your differentiation. How are you different? So that's it. That's what I'm saying. Is 15 or 20 seconds. You should be able to develop this wow statement, this very short, compelling summary of your value proposition that describes what you do, describes it in terms of compelling benefit, and differentiates it from everybody else. So that's what I strongly encourage you to go back and work on putting together in 3, maximum 4 sentences, okay? Now, I'm going to give you an example. And I picked this example. This is a real-world example, a real company that, after some coaching, came back to us with this. And, and I'll tell you, the reality is this is kind of prosaic. This is not, this is not doesn't sound like change the world. But to the target audience, this is compelling. This is a real company. I've changed the name. Superco has developed a low-cost rack and mount system that reduces the vibration caused by hard drives and cooling fans in data centers. That's kind of boring, but it's pretty clear, right? I know exactly where they are. So as an investor, if I'm interested in data center technology, if I'm interested in data center performance, then I'm into this. If I'm not interested in data center performance, then I don't care. And so I'm selecting out of this. If I'm an investor or a customer that is not interested in data center performance, then yeah, the fact that I understand what these guys are doing and I'm selecting out, that's fine. From the entrepreneur's point of view, they're focused on finding people who care about data center performance. Because vibration can dramatically reduce the performance of hard drives, our technology increases performance by up to 2.5x, as we've shown with our 3 initial customers. That's their second sentence. That's their compelling benefit. 2.5 times the performance in terms of data throughput that they can deliver with their technology. That's pretty compelling if you think about what data centers care about. And then I'm saying, well, wait a second, aren't other people solving this problem? Third sentence, unlike other solutions that require a redesign of the server, we can save our customers 40% of their total storage service cost. So there's a little bit of raises some questions. Exactly how are they doing this? It's a rack and mount system as opposed to a redesign of the server system. But what they've given me are some metrics that say the economics of this are better than their competitors. So they've given me performance metrics, 2.5x. They've given me economic metrics, 40% less cost. And if I'm a good target as an investor or a customer, this is a wow statement. So that's what I'm trying to get you to do. Now, having said all that, one of our particular mantras at Garage Technology Ventures is that we think that templates are almost always a bad thing, because each of you as an entrepreneur has a somewhat different angle in which you're attacking both the venture capitalists, the investors, as well as the customers. And so sometimes the problem is the issue, sometimes competition is the issue, sometimes market is the issue. Each situation is unique. And so what I'm telling you is, in spite of all the templates you might get from coaches and mentors and VCs and web blogs or whatever, it's critical you understand what the essence of what the template is trying to help you with is, and then transform that into what is most effective for you. We hate templates because entrepreneurs tend to think, oh, if I just fill in the blanks, then I've addressed all the problems I have. And we wind up getting very mediocre results from that. Instead, what I'm saying is this is a framework for thinking about how to tell this story, but you've got to recraft it in a way that's going to be most effective. And so what I'm going to tell you now is there are other ways of doing the same thing, alternative approaches to getting to wow. So in some cases where the use case is confusing or the application is not clear from simple descriptive language, maybe by telling a story or painting a picture you'll do a better job of getting to wow. So you might want to explain a story that in essence tells the same point. So the best way, the way this story might start is imagine if. Imagine if you had an application that pulled together all of your contacts from all of the different places where you have relationships, in social media, in your corporate database, in your email database, and all of the other places where you have contacts. And this application pulls all those contacts together into one place, preserving the source of those contacts, enabling you to have an integrated contact database. We provide that technology, right? So that happens to be a company that we're, sort of interested in. But it might make more sense, instead of describing it as a next generation customer relationship management application, instead of using that language, you could say, imagine if, right? Tell a story or paint a picture. Another way to get to wow is to use an analogy. So the best analogy we heard over the years was, again, in the early days of YouTube, or actually before YouTube, a company came into our office and said, we're the TV guide for the internet. So in the early days of video streaming, one of the questions was, how are you going to organize all of these video streams that are all over the internet? And these guys were going to create a directory of video streams, a one-stop shop where you could find video on the internet that might be in a variety of places. Another company more recently in Europe that I met with that said, we're the hotels.com of betting sites. So in the United States, we don't allow betting, so we don't know much about betting in the U.S. But in Europe, they actually have websites where you're allowed to bet money. But, depending upon what you want to bet on, you might have to go to any number of scores of different sites to find the best odds in order to find the sort of best bet that you want to play. These guys had aggregated all of these betting sites, over 100 different betting sites, into one place. So if you wanted to bet on a specific game, you could find the best betting site for making your bet. So, the hotels.com, sort of ironically, a website analogy for betting sites. Another way to get to wow is to drop a really big name. The best example of this happened to be when I was in New Zealand. I just loved this experience where, as you know, New Zealand has a lot of graphic arts, sort of movie graphics studios because of its recent history in the graphic arts and movie business. And so a woman CEO of a graphic arts studio got up and said, hey, we have a software suite that does special effects for the movies. Last year, we won the Academy Award. And everybody in the audience, of course, at that point went, wow. Now, unfortunately, most of you have not won an Academy Award. Maybe some of you have. God bless you. But, if you've got some impressive accomplishment like that, or a relationship like that, it gives you compelling credibility, let us know early on. We had one company come into our office, do their pitch, 35 slides. On the 34th slide, they had the team advisory board slide. It turned out one of the principals involved in the development of the company was a Nobel Prize winner. And we're kind of going, 55 minutes into the meeting, why didn't you tell us this earlier? So if you've got a really big name that you can drop, let us know pretty early on. So some quick other tips about your wow statement. Keep it simple. Cut down on the adjectives. Focus on concrete. Be engaging. You can't be too abstract. You can't be too tech-oriented. You've got to figure out how to talk to your audience at the level the audience understands what it is you're doing. Be customer-focused. Way too many technology teams or engineer-driven teams are so excited about how compelling their technology is that we don't understand why customers would care. So they can make technology do things that nobody has ever seen before on the planet, but absent a customer who cares about it, it's not that interesting. Be customer-focused. Anticipate the obvious issues. And this is the reason that templates are bad. Because in your individual company situation, the issue that's the hot issue for your company is going to be unique to your market, your technology, your competition, your customer. So depending upon where you are in terms of technology sectors, you need to preempt the question that's going to be burning in the back of the investor's brain. You know, for example, if you're a pharmaceuticals company, there's the, you know, compliance issue, in the U.S., the FDA issue, whatever it is that is going to be required for you to get to market. We want to understand how you're going to navigate that issue. So you all know from having spent just, you know, talking to a few outsiders, you know, potential customers, potential investors, you know, friends and family, you start getting common questions back, right? People say, oh, that's interesting, and then they'll go down a certain path. They'll say, doesn't ABC do that? So one obvious zone of obvious questions is, aren't there other people who already do what you're proposing to do? You know, another issue is, oh, is that legal, right? So in some countries, right, some technologies, some business models, it's not obvious that you're, you know, what the compliance or regulatory requirements are. So for each of you, there are going to be different sort of quote-unquote obvious questions that people tend to ask. To the extent possible, to the extent that they're important questions, you want to preempt them early on. It's critically important that you quantify your value proposition. You can't just say, you know, we're going to increase revenues for e-commerce sites, or we're going to increase performance at data centers, or we're going to reduce the carbon footprint for corporate partners. You've got to quantify it. You've got to quantify it in terms that enable you to say, and we are some factor better than the competition. So what we don't want you, don't jam, you know, 6, 7, 8 different numbers into your wow statement. So one or two metrics that validate the merit of your proposition are good to have in your wow statement. And then lastly, my last tip is don't lie. And so that has to do with, you know, the experience that we have and lots of investors have with the challenge of entrepreneurs being so enthusiastic about what they're doing that they tend to misrepresent the reality of the world. And so over the years, we at Garage have collected various lists we call the top 10 entrepreneur lies. And so I just want to quickly go through that before we start the question and answer period and share with you the top 10 entrepreneur lies that we hear as venture capitalists on our side of the table. The origin of this, actually, it came from very early on when we started Garage, and so I had crossed over from being an entrepreneur to being a VC, and I was at this big fancy schmancy conference called Demo in Southern California at this fancy resort, and at Demo, the idea is you have entrepreneurs that get on stage, they have 3 minutes to wow the audience. And the audience is mainly VCs, investors. And so it's a very sort of power, you know, situation where you've got all these investors with all this money, and the entrepreneurs are sort of eager to get some of that money. And so it's kind of cool, you know. I'm now on the other side. You know, most of my career I had been on the entrepreneur side begging for money. And now here I am, I'm on the VC side, and I want to learn the tricks of the VCs. So I'm standing with a little group of VCs at the back of the audience, and you know, we're listening to these entrepreneur pitches. And one of these guys I'm, you know, standing with, he turns to the rest of us and he says, you know how you tell when an entrepreneur is lying? And we kind of are oh, well, yeah, how do you tell? And the guy says, his lips are moving. And, you know, the point is, it's an old joke translated into the entrepreneur community, the point being that entrepreneurs tend to get so enthusiastic about what they're saying that frequently they misrepresent the reality. And so we've collected what we call the top 10 entrepreneurial lies. The point of this is try to avoid using these phrases when you're pitching VCs because they ring a sour note when we hear them. Lie number one is our projections are conservative. So I don't care what your number is in your 5-year projection, you're going to get to $240 million of revenue in 5 years, and then every entrepreneur says, and these projections are conservative because we have all these other possibilities, blah, blah, blah. So I can't tell you, every entrepreneur who comes into our office says that their projections are conservative no matter how extreme or outlandish their projections are. Line number two, our target market is $56 billion. And what this says to us is you have not done a good job of segmenting your market and identifying who exactly you're going after. So instead, entrepreneurs have been coached that it's really important that they target a big market opportunity. And so they go find this research data from IDG and Frost & Sullivan available on the internet, and they find somebody who says that, the market for data acceleration widgets in 2016 is going to be $56 billion. And, from a VC point of view, we know you're not really targeting a $56 billion market. You're targeting a tens or hundreds of millions of dollars market using a novel technology to create a novel solution. Line number three, we have a world-class team. Now, God bless, you love your co-founders, you love the roommate who joined you, who is working without salary for ramen noodles, God bless them, but probably you don't have a world-class team, and that's okay. That's okay. You don't have to have a world-class team when you're starting up. What you have to have is the ability over time to build and attract a world-class team, and that's what we're looking for. Line number four, our average sales cycle is 90 days. So, one of the big things that kills entrepreneurs in terms of missing their business plan is that they misunderstand the sales cycle. And so the problem is that as a startup company, let's say you're selling into enterprises, and somehow you convince 2 or 3 or 4 companies to take your product as a beta. And it turns out that it took you 2, 3, 4 weeks to convince each of these companies to take your beta. So now you're trying to do your business plan, you're trying to figure out what's our sales cycle. Well, heck, we got 3 beta customers in 45 days. That was pretty cool. So let's be conservative, right? So let's double that, right? So let's say it's 90 days, and let's call that our average sales cycle. Well, again, you see the fallacy in the statistics there. The reality is you got a new product selling into enterprises. It just takes longer. And so that kills a lot of companies, that they misunderstand the sales cycle. Line number 5, we have no direct competition. Now, while it may be true that nobody's using the technology that you're using to solve the problem you're solving, almost certainly other people are solving the problem some way. And so when we hear people say we have no direct competition, we figure these guys just don't get it. They don't understand what the alternatives are for their target customers. And so we run away from those entrepreneurs. Line number 6, no one else can do what we can do. So, that may or may not be true. I mean, we do like teams that have a particular talent or a particular unique capability to execute in certain domains. But the reality is almost certainly there are a bunch of other teams out there who can do what you can do. So don't pretend there aren't out there. What we want to see is that you have the ability to stay out ahead of them. Line number 7, all we need is 2% of the market. This represents an advance over the old days where it used to be that entrepreneurs said all we need is 1% of the market. And so entrepreneurs were coached that that was a bad thing to say. And instead of saying the right thing, they say now all we need is 2% or 2.25 or 3.2 or whatever it is. The reality is you're not segmenting the market correctly. We want the guys who are going after the other 98%. Line number 8, we'll be cash flow positive in 12 months. Well, that's what your Excel spreadsheet says, but that's not the reality of the outside world. And so it's, you know, we differentiate between entrepreneurs who believe their Excel spreadsheets and entrepreneurs who understand the real demands of the marketplace. We prefer the ones who understand the market. Line number 9. Our deal with Cisco or Microsoft or Oracle or Google is going to be completed in the next 2 weeks. You know, God bless, you're in discussions, you're having good meetings with Apple or whatever it is. Just because you're having a good meeting doesn't mean you're going to get that document signed. And so don't set yourself up to be a liar in that period of time. In the next 2 weeks, instead, wait until you sign the document and give us a positive surprise. We want positive surprises rather than we call you back in 3 weeks and say, oh, yeah, I understand your deal's signed, right? That was signed last week, right? That's what you told us, right? And you wind up having to go, well, you know, the lawyer was on maternity leave or whatever. They had a reorganization or whatever. And then already early on in the relationship, you're having to make excuses and apologize for missing. And line number 10 is, I'll be happy to hand over the reins to a new CEO. That's, again, entrepreneurs have been coached to know that that venture capitalists are concerned about the talent domain experience of the team, and I might want to bring in some additional talent. We want to hear that you're open to having new talent brought in. Our experience tends to be that no matter what the entrepreneur says at the front end, at the back end, when we start trying to build the team, the entrepreneur really, really wanted in his or her heart of hearts to be the CEO of this company. And it's critically important that you understand, if you're going to partner with an outside investor, the outside investor is entirely focused on the success of the company, not on your individual developmental experience, giving you the opportunity to be the CEO of your startup. So you need to come to terms as an entrepreneur with what you want to accomplish with this company. If what you really want to do is be a CEO, then you got to figure out a way to bootstrap this company and be successful without raising outside capital. If what you really want to do is build the biggest, most successful company possible and you want outside help, you've got to be willing to step aside if it comes to the point where your skill set is not the right skill set to take the company forward. So those are the top 10 lies of entrepreneurs. Put it all together, create a clear, compelling, incredible statement of your value proposition using words that are, that enable us to say at the end of your pitch, wow, I really want to engage with you. I want to hear more. I believe what you're saying. Avoiding any of those credibility damaging lies that I talked about. That's what you want to get to. So that's how you get to wow. I want to thank Greg Holson, who helped me put this presentation together. If any of you need help putting together a presentation, Greg is a great resource for you. And I want to share with you my contact information. I know we're running tight on time. I ran a little bit long here. We started a little bit late. But if you have follow-up questions, if you want the slides, if you've got some additional ideas, if you want to challenge me, here's my contact information. You can see my email address. You got my Twitter account. You can follow me on Twitter. We have a bunch of resources on the Garage website. We have a prose version of this guide called Getting to Wow. So you have a text version of Getting to Wow if you go to our website. You can see that. We also have some guides on your executive summary, on your pitch, on what it takes to raise venture capital, all on our website. So please feel free to explore that. As you may or may not know, my partner, Guy Kawasaki, wrote a book called The Art of the Start. We tried to pull together into this book all the things we had learned as entrepreneurs and through the early days of Garage on what it takes to be successful as an entrepreneur, and some tips to be successful, some mistakes to avoid, some resources to help you be successful. And for those of you who've been following my partner, Guy Kawasaki, more recently he's come out with a book called Enchantment, which I encourage you to take a look at. It's all about what it takes to change the hearts and minds of customers, of investors, of employees, of partners. It's sort of how to win friends and influence people for the 21st century. So with that, let me turn it over to my colleagues here. If we have any questions, if we have time for a little question and answer session here, if I haven't run too long, be happy to talk further.
Bill, let me, yeah, thanks, Javier. I know you're grabbing the screen back there, and Javier, I just suggest you put the screen onto the ANZA schedule slide straight away, because we are right on close time here. And I'm just going to put one question out there, Bill. We had several questions, so what I can assure the audience is that we will get those questions across to Bill, we'll get answers for you, and we'll email those out to everyone. But there was one question that got that got asked actually a couple of times in various different ways. So so let me just put that to you, Bill. It's probably a quick answer. How many meetings do you take each year at Garage, and how many entrepreneurs get you to say wow when they first pitch to you? So I guess it's a bit of a percentages indicator they want.
Right. I would say it's funny. We had a conference call yesterday, Monday, right? Where the entrepreneurs got us to wow. It's a material science company that has developed the world's longest carbon nanotubes. And if you can develop really long carbon nanotubes, you can do things that traditional vendors of carbon nanotubes can't do. And so we were looking at each other, and we were going wow while the entrepreneur was pitching us. That unfortunately doesn't happen enough. It doesn't happen enough. We probably average, we figured it out, it's about 1.5 entrepreneurs a day where we do a follow-up session. And usually I would say 2/3 of those, 3/4 of those are by phone, where we'll do a pitch over the phone. Maybe 1/4 of them are in our office. So that's probably 2%. Basically we meet with about 2% of the applicants. I shouldn't say this out loud. I promised my partners. One of the things it's a really unfortunate part about the venture capital world, and I just wound up being a little bit too honest there. But unfortunately, the venture capital world, all of us are in a position where we wind up just saying thank you very much, but no, to, boy, somewhere close to 98% of the entrepreneurs that we touch. So in that sense, I mean, don't feel sorry for me, but it's kind of a brutal world that we live in, having to say no to so many enthusiastic, wonderful entrepreneurs. So it's a really, really low percentage. And so the issue is, how do you increase your percentage? And the way you increase your percentage is you do really good networking, you get good, credible references, and you get good traction in terms of some validation of your wow statement from customers, beta customers, alpha customers, whatever it is. whatever you can do to validate, that increases your percentages dramatically. Because I'll tell you, 95% of entrepreneurs just send us stuff without any credible validation that what they're saying is true, much less compelling.
Look, that's I think they're great couple of personal insights and observations to wrap up on, Bill. So thank you so much.
Well, I wish I could leave on a much more up note in terms of, but actually let me throw out that the cool thing about the world today is that it's much easier to generate revenues without raising venture capital than it used to be in the old days. So the reality is, in the world today, you have an opportunity to bootstrap your company, to get customers, to get revenues, without having to raise a meaningful amount of venture capital. And that, I just strongly urge almost all entrepreneurs that I come across to focus on customers first and VCs second. It's a little bit, not in my interest, but I think it's in entrepreneurs' interest to do what they can to generate revenues, because then the percentages become so much better if you've got customers and revenues than if you don't. So, okay.
Yeah, and Bill, thank you so much for that. And just on that note, we work not exclusively, but in the main with Australian entrepreneurs. And because of the climate in Australia, because of the nature of the market there, and because of the nature of the venture industry there, we really see some of the best entrepreneurs at bootstrapping, building their business and growing revenues as a priority, far in excess of what you would see necessarily here in the US. So it's great to see that today that is very doable, but also very, very important, and that Australian entrepreneurs as a group are traditionally really good at it. So that's good to hear.
I'll just, in a shameless, sucking up to the audience, I love Australian entrepreneurs. I love Australia. I think it's a great place to start up a company. And the networks that you guys like ANZA Tech have pulled together to enable entrepreneurs to leverage one another in the ecosystem to be successful is fantastic. So God bless you guys.
Yeah, great. Thank you so much. So one more reminder to the audience that ANZA will be down in Australia for 4 weeks in March. The details are on your screen. Send us an email if you would like to discuss your plans for the US or China, and we'd be delighted to organize one-on-one meeting time with you. So again, on behalf of myself, Javier, and the ANZA team, we want to thank you, Bill, and all of you, the audience, for participating in our first webinar for 2013 today, and I look forward to connecting with many of you in the near future. Thank you.
Thank you, Vicki. My pleasure. God bless all of you guys, and good luck to you all.